Welcome back to Baking from Books, our video series where I, a reference librarian, attempt to make baking and dessert recipes drawn from or inspired by beloved fiction books. I am C or Charlie, pronouns they, them, and thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you've seen and enjoyed our previous videos. This is going to be our final video for this go-around, but hopefully there will be more in the future, so stay tuned. Today, I am trying to make Lembas, or Elven bread, inspired by Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, at this point, I don't think the Lord of the Rings series, books or movies, really needs an introduction, so I'm not going to give one. If you haven't watched or read these already, do check it out. If 3 books or 3 movies is too much for you to take on, I would advise trying to read The Hobbit, which is my favorite because it's much more standalone. It's one book on its own, and it's a little less bleak in places. So, Lord of the Rings, if you don't already know about it, please check it out. I'm going to assume you do. Lembas is first mentioned in The Fellowship of the Ring, the first book. This is one of our copies, and isn't that illustration just gorgeous on the front? It's first mentioned close to the end of this book. The adventurers stop at the home of the elves and get various things to help them on their journey, and one of these things is Lembas. And this is how they describe it in the book. This is a quote: "Eat a little at a time, and only at need, for these things are given to serve you when all else fails. The cakes will keep sweet for many, many days if they are unbroken and left in their leaf wrappings as we have brought them. One will keep a traveler on his feet for a day of long labor." So these are supposed to be very tasty cakes that last a long time and really give you strength for what you need to do. Unfortunately, our version is not going to stay fresh indefinitely, so don't assume that it will. But it will stay good for a good long time if you store it correctly, and I'm assuming that means airtight containers. That has worked well for me so far. It's a very sweet and light bread/cake when done correctly. And it doesn't take that long to make, and it's very pocket-sized and stackable, so it does make a good road trip snack, even if you're not going to destroy the One Ring in the fires of Mordor. So I have had to make several practice batches this time around to finally get it right. I did, but these are my tips for you this time. First, I tried to make it with whole wheat flour. That was way too heavy, and it still tasted good, but it was very flat. It's supposed to be puffy. So then I made it with white flour, but I burned the bottom of it. So I had to turn my oven temperature down and use the top rack instead of the middle, and then I finally got a good result. So basically, follow the recipe very carefully and know your oven. Know whether it runs hotter or cooler or what rack things need to be on to cook correctly. That's my main tip this time around. I'm going to try a good camera angle again this time. Hopefully I can do pretty well like I did last time. You won't see as much of my face, but you will see me and my hands while I'm doing things. Hopefully, that's the goal. So let's get to it. Okay, so the first thing you would do is preheat your oven to 425 degrees, or in my case where my oven runs a little hot, 420 degrees worked better. There isn't an oven here, so just use your imagination. Next, you take a large bowl. I've got my handy mixer here, and I have tried different attachments, and this is the one that worked well for me. You take a large bowl and you mix your flour, baking powder, and salt. We're going to do those one at a time. I've got my all-purpose flour, white flour, because I learned from my mistakes. One leveled off. Two and a bit. And 1/2 cup. Plop. It's not in the recipe, but I assume you're supposed to get flour everywhere because that's what I do every time. So 2.5 cups of flour, but don't put your flour all the way away because you will need it in a little while. Then you need baking powder, 1 tablespoon. And get that everywhere too, just for the fun of it. 1 tablespoon of baking powder. That you won't need again, so you can put that fully away. And then 1 pinch of salt, which I just realized I don't have. So again, use your imagination. Salt is going in. Oh good. Okay. Then 1/2 cup of butter, cold. This is very important apparently, and one of our baking tips is always know the temperature that your ingredients have to be at because it does make a difference. But first, we're going to blend together the flour, baking powder, and salt. The imaginary salt. Okay, good news. I found some salt. So we're going to add that in. It says a pinch. My mom actually knows how much a pinch is, but I can't remember. So I just usually dash some in there and hope for the best. Okay, pinch of salt. Ta-da. And we're going to let it mix for a minute. Okay, so once the flour, baking powder, and salt is mixed together, the next step is cut in cold butter and blend until the mixture forms coarse crumbs. Now, there isn't a sitcom scene for this, but I would love to know, what does cut in mean? And again, I feel like one time my mom explained it to me, but now I can't remember. So what I usually do is you take your cold stick of butter, and one time I just literally dumped a whole stick in the bowl and then stuck a knife in there and cut at it. But that takes a while, and I don't think that's really what they mean. So take my butter, still in a stick, and I chop it into smaller bits ahead of time. And lately what I've started doing is I put the butter in and then I let the thing start mixing again so that it can start working on it. This is also because I'm just lazy and I don't like how much time it takes if you do the steps one at a time. So if you are a wiser baker and you know to do things one step at a time, or how to do cut in the butter better, please do tell me. I would love to know why and how to do these things. Alright. And it called for a 1/2 cup of butter, and according to my math from reading the box, 1 stick is a 1/2 cup. Hopefully that's correct, but it has not failed me so far. Not cooperating with me. Okay, so all the butter is in there now, and now it's just a matter of letting it mix and sort of shudder a little bit until all the butter is like broken up and mixed in until it looks sort of more like coarse crumbs than the really powdery flour. That could take a little bit, so I'm going to pause and come back so you don't have to watch me mix. I think you got enough of that last time with the ice cream, don't you think? Okay, we've got coarse crumbs, and just for reference, it looks roughly like this. It doesn't look all that different to me, but it is sort of uneven and looks vaguely clumpy. So we're going to call that coarse crumbs. And next you stir in brown sugar, 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar, and that's the kind of sugar that gets packed into the cup. Hopefully in this kind of a cup, although I'm not sure. Plop. Okay, so 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar, and then 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Now the fun story about cinnamon is the first time I made this recipe, my very first practice batch, I was doing it at home and using my own ingredients, and I thought I had everything I needed, and then I looked in my cupboard and realized I didn't have ground cinnamon. And I had cinnamon sticks, and so foolishly I thought maybe I can grind the cinnamon sticks into a powder. Don't waste your time trying to do that. It does not work. It just made a mess and was very disappointing. So then I used cinnamon sugar, and that worked okay, but it has come out better since I've had actual ground cinnamon. So 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. And then you need 2/3 of a cup of whole milk. Now again, do as I say and not as I do, because I don't have a liquid measuring cup. I have just the dry ingredient measuring cups. We're going to use 2 of these 1/3 of a cups of whole milk. 1, 2. Okay. And splosh, because why not? And then you need 2 teaspoons of honey. Now this is the part where I might make a mess on the counter because honey, once it starts to crystallize, can be really hard to squeeze out. So I have to set the spoon down and use both hands and all of my manly strength. Oh, squeeze it. Okay. Yep, I made a mess. Okay, so there's 1. And getting honey to come out of the measuring spoon is always entertaining. Okay, plop. 1 more. Hulk squeeze number 2. Okay. And 2. Tablespoons of honey. And I officially don't know where my brain is because you also need 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, which I have lost or forgotten. So we're going to use imaginary vanilla extract and put that in. Yay. And then you mix this all up until a dough has formed. And I did try a different attachment on the mixer for this, a dough hook, and I thought surely that will do it. No, it did not. So the paddle style attachment is the one that has made a dough for me in the past, and it doesn't actually take that long. Okay, here we are, and it looks like this, which I'm counting as a dough because it's all kind of sticking together, which is good. Then, this is the other part that makes a mess. Now comes the part where you roll out the dough on a floured surface. So we're going to flour this surface and somehow get all this out and ready to roll out. Alright, our surface is floured. And the dough, now this is the part that I sort of make interpretations where the dough's like this, right? It's not just in one clump. And once you put dough out on a floured surface, it sort of doesn't want to stick together again. Like all of my batches have had raggedy ones that once you squish the dough back together and roll it out again, it doesn't stick together as well. So I tend to stick it together with my hands first before putting it on the floured surface to try and form it into one lump. So it's like this. And should I have gloves on? Yes. But this isn't really something that my coworkers would enjoy as much as the ice cream, so I'm not as worried about sharing this time. Because it's fine, but it's bread. It's not like, yay, ice cream, or chocolate, or anything like that. And besides, some people are gluten-free and couldn't have the flour, so it's not something I'm focused on sharing. So that's why no gloves. That, and apparently my disaster baking today is about forgetting everything, so... So you're rolling it out, right? And I have a very wimpy little rolling pin. You wouldn't have to use a rolling pin, I don't think. I feel like I've seen hacks where you don't have to use an actual rolling pin. I just happen to have this little one. And you're trying to get it to a 1/2 inch thickness, which I did not take that seriously the first time, and then I did it with my mom, and she was actually measuring the thickness, and I was like, oh, I suppose that would be better. And I'm trying to get it into a roughly rectangular shape, because you have to cut squares out of it. Alright, so it is now flattish. I'm going to take my ruler, which is way longer than I need, but it's the only one I had at home, and I'm going to see if it's about a 1/2 inch. And depending on where you measure, it's not exactly, but I'm going to say it's close enough. So this is about a 1/2 inch thickness. It's not as thin as I would expect it to need to be, but that's what it calls for, so that's what we're going to go with. And then you take your ruler and you measure out 3 by 3 inch squares. So I usually lay it on the dough, I don't know where I should start, like this, and then you take your knife, and I just lightly score the lines to start while I'm measuring out the square. And again, there would probably be a better and more scientific way to do this, but I don't know how. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And that's not even close to a square. But you know what? It'll taste good even if it's not a perfect square. And then I cut down all the way through. Like so. And I liberate the square from the rest of the dough. Ta-da! And then you take each square and you put it on a greased cookie sheet, like this one. I greased it with Crisco this time. It actually is useful, and I was out of cooking spray. So you set it on the cookie sheet, and then before you bake it, you take your knife one more time and you score it from corner to corner to make an X across the top. And this is where it puffs and looks very graceful, but my cuts are always raggedy, so it looks vaguely raggedy too, but this is my disaster bake with your heart. So then they look like this, and then you just repeat until all the dough is in squares like this. And I'm not going to make you watch that because it takes a while and you have to re-roll the dough a couple of times. And ta-da! Got them all measured and cut out and placed on the cookie sheet with their little diagonals cut in them. Did I eventually get bored with re-rolling the dough and just eat the rest of it? No comment. But the good thing about this recipe is if you do decide to eat some of the dough, there's no eggs in it, which is the main thing that I think would make it dangerous, right? Like, if that's not true, let me know. But like, I don't really see any harm in it, and the dough tastes pretty good, even though the vanilla extract is imaginary. So then, the only thing left to do is to put these in the oven, your 425-degree oven, for 10 to 12 minutes. Now again, because I burned mine, I would start with 10 and look at them at 10 and see how they look. But, yes, just checking. You cook them 10 to 12 minutes or until they're golden brown. Bearing in mind that in the book, they're golden brownish on the outside and creamy on the inside. So again, I would stay on the low end of that 10 to 12 minutes personally, just from the number of times that I've done this. And then they look like this. Then they look like this, and they're all puffy, and they've risen, and they've got a little bit of stretching, splitting, I don't know what the word is, around the cracks. So they look very official, really, and you can see that some of mine got very floury in this last batch, and so they're not as golden brown as they are white, but they've risen, and the bottoms are golden brown instead of black, so I'll take it. And then I've got some on the bottom that are more raggedy from my messy cutting, but they all still taste pretty good. So this is what they look like at the end. Yay. And they taste like bread, but very sweet. And they're not so dry like the honey cakes were that you really need a beverage with it. Like, it doesn't hurt. But yes, they're very good. This is how they're roughly supposed to look, I think. If you get a different result that's better, please let me know, as always. And that's all she wrote. Thanks so much for watching my latest version of chaotic baking or disaster baking. I am so glad that you watched this, and please do share your results and your advice with me. I would love to learn and see how other people do it and get better as I go, because even in my practice batches I got better, but it always helps to have advice from other people who actually know roughly what they're doing. So please do share your results with me. I would love to talk to some of you about this and what you think about it. Keep watching our website and our social media for more great programs coming up, and hopefully more videos of me baking or trying to bake will be on the horizon after a brief hiatus, so I don't have to bring my mixer into work every time. So in the meantime, happy reading, happy baking.